Hi.
Hello, Sabina. You can see we had Sabina in the studio today. We did a few different looks. This first one, we just need to get some digitals out of the way. So you can see that light on the right, just two lights at max power bouncing off the walls, the white walls. Sabina's a little bit of a micromanager, if you didn't know. And then we have that one key light up top with the softbox. I'm not going to bore you with the digitals. And here we're going to load up some good old Ultramax 400 35mm color print film. Ultramax. Load it into my Nikon F2. We're using a 50mm 1.4 AIS lens on there. This is my go-to 35mm setup right here. Now you get to watch me load film. Very exciting stuff. As you can hear, I'm doing a voiceover right now. So I recorded the entire session, and I thought I would do just kind of like a commentary over the shoot to kind of talk through what I was thinking about. I'm not against first of the roll photos. I don't care if I lose a frame or two. There we go. Wind once, have half a frame exposed, and whatever the first shot we take will be halfway exposed. You know it worked because I left that part in. You got the mirror, you got a phone, you got this, Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you just don't get a first of the roll shot like you're expecting. You see I'm double fisting these cameras here. I got my only digital camera is a Ricoh GR Digital 4 from 2011, not the GR4 Digital from the most recent version of it. There is a big difference. That's a 10 megapixel different sensor, completely different camera that looks exactly the same basically. And it's great for black and white, but I do use it sort of as my light meter. And you'll see me often pull it out just to check that everything's in order before I take some film photos. So this uncut studio session basically is going to be, you watch me light the scene, you watch me take every single photo that I take during the session. I'm not cutting any photos out unless I had some good reason to, but for the most part, you're going to see the unedited raw photos from the digital, the Ricoh GR Digital, and then the film scans. So here we're on the GR Digital. There it is. First shot of the shoot. Usually what I'm doing here is making sure my settings are the way I want them. I could obviously get a light meter, like a real light meter, and use it, but I've never been able to justify that purchase because I've always had a digital camera around that I can use to meter the light. In a studio setting like this, that's kind of good enough. I know if you're doing landscape or some long exposure stuff of architecture, you're going to need a more accurate reading, but for my purposes, a digital camera has always worked to meter the light. It just feels a little less analog. So, I know that bothers some people. That's why you'll go on Love Island, right? That's why you'll go on Love Island, right? To meet your future husband.
No, that's for me to get rich.
Is that what happens?
Whenever that happens.
I said, is that what happens to people who are going?
I guess if you stay.
I'm working on the iPad there. I'm just changing the intensity of the lights, the color of the lights, all that. I have control over from the Hive app for my Hive lights here. First of the roll, look at that. Got the half frame light leak and everything. Going back to the digital here to check everything out. There's our first real shot of the roll. You were going for that orange, red, Mars, pretending we're on Mars look here. You'll notice a slight difference in the color, obviously, because the film is going to react to the light differently than the DNG negative that's coming from the Ricoh sensor. But essentially, I'm always trying to get color correct photos based on the way I lit the scene that I'm lighting. So when I'm scanning film and converting the colors manually myself, that's kind of what I'm going for. And you can see it kind of matches a little better with the video than the Ricoh does. The video is a little off too because of the white balance being on auto, which I fixed for the next video, so stay tuned if you're not a fan of the quality of the video here. It's going to improve a lot in the next one. Now that we're really getting into the swing of it, let's talk about the lighting here. So you see I have the bounce on the left going off the wall. I like to do that a lot of times just to get some ambient fill light throughout the scene and the shadows, just to give the shadows a little bit of tonality, either with color or with where the gray point is. And so that's what that light over there on the left is doing, and then I'm moving this overhead light on the boom arm with the barn doors to usually focus the light on the face of the person I'm photographing. And the boom arm is nice because it just gets it out of the way, so I can stand directly under it and not be fiddling around a light stand.
It's like only a number of times. I think the last time was around like COVID.
Never tried a pixie cut?
Oh god.
Gotta try it at least once. Alright, now I'm throwing the softbox onto that light I was talking about earlier, because I want a more direct fill than the bounce was giving me. It does feel like... So I'll talk a lot. I assume I'm going to talk a lot about lighting ratios in these videos, because that is a lot of my process, is figuring out the lighting ratio I want for each session and setup and everything. So obviously the hottest light is always going to be on the subject, so I usually have that at 100%. And then if that's our one, then the backdrop I'm usually going to have at least one full stop, usually 2 or 3 stops darker than the light that's hitting the subject's face. And that is where, if you're not used to doing that, a light meter can really dial that in to be exact, to where you know that your main focal point being the model's face. In this case, you could meter for your key light, and then meter for where the backdrop light is hitting the backdrop. And you can make sure essentially that it's exactly a stop or 2 stops darker. But I've been doing this for a long time, using these same lights for a long time, so I kind of know my percentages on the dimmers and distances to get the ratios that I'm happy with. And then I just do a quick test shot on digital and make sure, and then that's really the whole process. Another thing you'll see me do quite often is use my key light fall off on the backdrop. And that's happening here. I'm standing in the way with my big old body, but when I get out of the way, you'll see the fall off from my key light, which I'm turning down a little bit because I think it was too hot. And I'm going to make sure that I got it where I want it here. Yeah, so you see the fall off is lighting the backdrop. And naturally, that's going to be a little bit darker than the light that's actually hitting subject, but it's a little more even 1-to-1 ratio here. Which I'm okay with. What I really like about using barn doors is they can kind of feel like light coming through a doorway or a window. And that's kind of what this lighting setup feels like to me. Fill on the left, since it's red, it's filling in the shadows with red. If there was no fill, or if the fill was white, it'd be gray or black. So just adding a little bit of tone into the shadows with the fill, something I like to do. And you'll see me do it pretty often. The Ultramax handles these orange tones really well. But now I'm about to switch to blue, and I don't think it handles blue as well, as we're going to see in a moment. For blues and really saturated tones, outside of yellow to red, I really like to use Ektar. I think it captures most colors pretty vividly, and then you can dial it in if you're manually converting your negatives from negative to positive. You scan them as a positive and then convert that negative as a, I don't know, maybe I'll make a video about that one day, but essentially I have full control over the color, and using Ektar has historically given me the most accurate result to the way it looked in real life, where the film isn't necessarily affecting the color at all. But I know a lot of people hate Ektar. I think that's just because labs give you a result that you're not happy with, but that's just me. These aren't necessarily bad photos, but it's just not the kind of blue I was going for in the moment. I was going for a more desaturated, icy blue, but I think they came out a little more, losing a lot of detail in the blue, so it was like a little more muddy, I guess, than I was wanting. But that's the way it goes. I'm including every shot of the roll. You can see the successes and the failures. And again, these are just the digital negative files. I'm not doing any edits at all. I just saved them as JPEGs and then dropped them in here. And you're seeing every single one we took. You see the lighting setup hasn't changed too much. We're still using the key light with the fall off from the key light on the backdrop. And then that fill on the left. All I've changed is the colors. And now I'm going to change it again. Or are we done with this look? We might be done with this look.
Say cheese.
Say cheese. Yep. That's me. We'll do some long exposures now. Go 1/8 of a second. 400 speed film, 2.8. We'll see how that comes out. Yes, we will. Long exposures on Ultramax 400 was definitely a choice that I made. Not the best choice I've ever made. Typically I'll use Lomography 100 or Ektar 100 for these kind of photos, but we had Ultramax 400 in the camera, so that's what we used. And the reason why you'll see it's a little more grainy, and not a good grainy. It's like a dirty kind of cheap grain, not a good fine grain that you get from Ektar. But still got a couple that I'm happy with, especially towards the end. Alright, so the lighting here, we need a lot more shadow, typically for a long exposure, the way I like to do them. The shadows kind of give you a shape in your frame. You've watched my long exposure tutorial, you know that. But in this instance, I'm actually trying to get a little more of an overexposed look on the face. So you'll see I'm lighting the face a lot more evenly than I normally would for these. But still creating shadow outside of that. Because I wanted the shape to be more of a abstract kind of blob of a face, more so than a finely detailed highlights that create the shape of the face, which is how I normally do it. But
yeah, it's not bad.
yeah, so we're just trying to dial in the feel and the settings through the digital camera here. You see all of these have sucked so far, and that's completely fine. Never perfect on the first shot. Looks cool on the camera. Does it feel better or worse having the whole view of yourself?
I like it. I think it's cool.
Dialing in the color that I want here. The exposure on these shutter drag photos is interesting because a lot of times, like, you might be metered correctly with the long exposure, but when you pull the camera away, you might be exposing the face a little bit less time than what you're metering for. So sometimes you want to overexpose it a little bit to compensate for how quickly you're moving the camera away. Which you would do by, opening up the aperture or bringing up the ISO a little bit if you're on digital. The shutter speed's at about 1/8 of a second for all these. Typically where I like it. It gives you just enough drag to kind of fill the frame and finish off at the edge of the frame. And I guess with the speed at which I move my hand, it works well. I guess I move my hand at 1/8 of a second. Now we're putting it on film. And again, I'm not really happy with any of these, but that's why you take a lot of them. I say a lot of them, but one roll of film. Turn your body towards this side. Towards this one. Changing up the pose here. moving a barn door half an inch can make all the difference in a photo. Still not happy with these. I think it's mostly the film choice that was getting in the way of me enjoying these, because I did like the digital a little more. Again, these are the raw digital files, no edits or anything, no crops. Right from the camera. As far as where my head is at during this, I still feel like I'm in a place of trying to find what I'm looking for. I don't do a lot of planning ahead of time for shoots. I'll usually have a general idea of what we're going to do, but not a plan necessarily in terms of like, here's what each frame is going to look like. I like to kind of find, especially with the lighting, I like to find it in the moment. Makes it a lot more fun and interesting, and kind of keeps you open to any possibility during a shoot, which is where you find the best stuff. Still hating these. Hating every single thing that I'm doing here, and I know it in the moment. Even though I can't see the film, I know it's not what I'm going for. So I'm still trying to find it. I decided I liked the lighting setup, so I brought our shutter speed back up to a normal range, and I just wanted to capture a few of these to get the lighting set up captured without the long exposure. And this is where I think I kind of knew the long exposures weren't going the way I wanted them to, so I'm just going to switch up the look. And this is going to be a painful few minutes because, again, I'm finding it. It's painful for me. I don't know. Maybe you'll enjoy watching it, but I'm testing this out where I'm just leaving everything in. Normally this would be something I'd cut out, but you're about to watch a few minutes of me just trying to find something that I like. Which again, I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's part of the process. It gets you to where you want to be creatively. You know, you have to go through this whole trial and error process. So I'm not worried in the moment. I'm not like panicking, like, oh my God, I'm not going to find anything. I just know that this is how I find things. I just move the lights around. Play with the shadows, see how the light is falling on the model's face and what they're wearing, change the posing, change the colors, change the lighting ratios. I'm just trying all these different things until it feels like, oh no, this is what's right for this moment. Sometimes that comes faster than others, but personally I like it when 80% of my time is spent fiddling around with the lights and the angles of the shadows and the barn doors and the modifiers and the lighting ratios, just to land on what I think feels right to my eyeball and then capture it on the camera. Yeah, so we're just throwing shit at the wall, seeing what sticks here. Didn't like that. We're gonna change it up a little more.
I was with them. They had like a work meeting in Zurich, so I actually met up with them last summer. But it was only for like 3 days, so it was perfect.
When in doubt, just make everything red. Right?
Plan what we're gonna do because I know
Still not happy with it.
that if I just come and be like I don't know, like we can just what should we
And eventually what I'm going to realize is the thing I'm mainly not happy with is the pose and the direction of the light. So I'm going to end up flipping the light around the other way. And that's when I feel like I'll kind of find something I'm happy with. Still not there though. Not at all. Looks terrible. That's what I'm thinking right now. You see, I put the camera down there. A lot of times that's the biggest mistake I'm making is the camera's in my hands. And I think we all make that mistake. We're a little too eager to shoot, not thinking or taking the time to get the scene ready before we pick up the camera and we're ready to shoot. So I'll always talk about how I want the scene to look good to my eyes first, before I even touch the camera. And then I'll pick up the camera, dial in the settings, and capture what looked good to my eyes. That's always the goal, but it's easy, especially once you get into the swing of the shoot, the flow of the shoot, to put the camera down and recalibrate. But that's what I had to do right there.
I guess, am I shooting the side?
And this is where I realized that
Lighting the side?
I think I just need to flip everything.
No, it'll work this way too. Just flip it.
Put the camera back down and fix it. This is the process. Like I said, I don't know if this will be enjoyable. It's painful for me to watch because I see all my mistakes, but hopefully that authentic kind of raw, uncut look at a photographer's process is helpful for somebody.
So what's your plan? What's that?
That's why I call these shadow sessions, because I want it to feel like you're literally just sitting in the corner watching me photograph somebody. All the mistakes, all the thoughts that I have. I guess this is a level deeper than that. This is if you were both shadowing me and able to read my mind. This is what it would be like. Welcome. Alright, we're flipped. Now I gotta get the light where I want it.
Are you growing yours out?
I kind of just get like one haircut a year,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I skipped 2025. Because it's getting pretty long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'll like decide, okay, I'm ready to cut it, and then I'll get a compliment on it, and I'm like, I can keep it going a little longer.
I think your hair looks good. I've never seen it really, really long though, but I think
Yeah, when I had it long, I always had it in a bun, so I don't feel like I really appreciated it.
yeah. Same. Like I think like if it wasn't for photos,
These moments where you're setting up the light, not worried about the camera, not worried about taking the photo, is also good for building rapport with whoever you're photographing, making them feel comfortable, laughing, cutting the tension, all that good stuff.
You can throw up a picture of me with braided hair.
Yeah, there's thanks to my sister for braiding my hair there. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So I'm doing something that I think isn't necessarily intuitive if you're just getting started in studio photography or lighting anyone, anywhere. Typically you're thinking, okay, the light needs to be coming from the front or at a 45-degree angle, but a lot of times you can move your key light to, I don't know what the degrees would be. Would it be, I don't know, like a reverse 45-degree angle? Coming from the opposite side of wherever you're shooting from. So that's what the light on the softbox back there is doing. And it's gonna create a lot more drama, shadow, interest.
That kind of helps me too. When I'm
Feels a little more cinematic, common in cinema lighting. And it'll feel less just like a regular portrait shot and more dynamic. By moving the light. I like to think of it as, I guess it would be 180 degrees from where you're shooting, give or take 80 degrees. If you're thinking about 45-degree angle from where the model's face is, but from behind instead of the front like you normally would. I know there's a better way to describe that, but you can see it. You see what I'm talking about, right? It's only lighting that right side of her face. And then by moving our, what was our fill light earlier, to the backdrop with the barn doors and this kind of beam configuration, that's kind of the backdrop to the shadows that are created from the light that I'm using as my fill light on the left. You see what that does is keeps Sabina from just drifting off into darkness and having a highlight on the left like she's a crescent moon, and instead keeps the shape of her silhouette without being just like a boring white backdrop, but an interesting shape of a beam behind her. And the softbox light is also creating kind of a fill with the fall off, where you can see like those deep reddish magenta tones in on the floor and on the backdrop.
Let's put it on film.
And I was pretty happy with how these were coming out digitally, so we're gonna put it on film now. And if you've ever used the manual focus film camera in low light, this is low light here. Even though the auto exposure on the camera that I'm filming this with is making it look really bright, it was basically complete shadow with that small edge light, so it was very hard to focus, and you'll see that shot was out of focus. And I knew in the moment that it was going to be really hard to get these in focus, so I took a few. A little better, still soft. And now we're in focus.
Hard to focus.
And we're in focus, just like that. There you go. All that time to get to this. That was a digital shot there. And now that I know I got something I was happy with there, I'm just going to change the color and get a slightly different mood. Going back to that icy blue. Choosing colors is all about, typically it's all about the energy of the person I'm photographing, what looks good with their skin and their outfit and kind of the energy that I feel when I'm around them. So there's not an exact science to it, it's just going by feeling in the moment.
I saw like this guy from like Europe. It's like a
There is, if you want to nerd out, like if someone has green undertones in their skin, you want the light to counteract those green undertones or red undertones with, very slight variations to white light. But
Stay within that zone. And
I'm typically not that worried about that.
also, just not being afraid to look down.
We go for in-camera as much as possible, but that is something that's very easy to rectify with a little bit of color correction.
It's my face.
Alright, so here we are back in the blue zone. And the auto white balance on the camera I'm filming this with, again, is turning my blue into white. It thinks it's doing a good job, but it's not. My unedited, raw, digital shots. And then we put it on film. And again, the blue, way too deeply saturated for what I was going for, but it is what it is. Right, and once I had those two color setups with that lighting setup from before, I was satisfied. And now we're moving on to, or I guess returning to what I wanted to do earlier with the long exposures, with kind of an overexposed long exposure on the face, to give it kind of, I guess you could say we're going for like a ghostly kind of apparition. I don't know. Like an alien that you just captured for a moment. Again, we're using digital to dial everything in. We'll see what we end up with in a moment. Nice autofocus job with my camera back there.
It definitely does help, like once you feel like you have a bag of poses that you go to.
I'll typically light it overhead when I'm doing long exposures because it does create some more dramatic shadows. It gets the light off the backdrop. The barn doors focus it in where I want it. That's usually what you'll see me do when I start on the long exposure lighting setup. So we're just dialing it in, getting the right angle. We're getting pretty close to something I'm happy with here. Getting into what I was going for earlier with a evenly lit face, but still a long exposure that works. So that means a little less movement of the camera. You see I'm doing kind of a short jitter with the long exposure as opposed to dragging it all the way. And again, I wanted it overexposed, so you see I went a stop brighter there. But it was too bright, so I brought it back down. Now I'm taking a seat. Not happy with that. Yeah. Yeah. A little better. Yeah. You see, that's what happens when you saw with my hand, I fully dragged it all the way down as opposed to the jitter. And with this even lighting, that basically just gives you a smudge across the frame. But with that quick little jitter, you saw it looked great. And that's where I'm happy to put it on film. Again, the blue's a little too saturated, so that kind of ruins it for me. But you can see kind of what I was talking about with the grain being a little too rough on the Ultramax 400. You really need a fine grain with this kind of technique. At least, especially to get it the way I like it to look, I need a fine grain. Other people might like it with the rough grain. So in my mind, I was pretty happy with those last few shots, especially with how it was looking on the digital camera. Of course, it didn't translate to film the same way it did on digital, but nevertheless, I was happy. So I'm changing up the light setup here to try to see if we can find another look with this long exposure technique. We're just dialing in the barn doors the way we want them. I'm always looking for the shadows. I think I tend to view lighting more in where the shadows are falling than where the light is falling. I'm trying to create shapes and interest with the shadows because I think that that's what makes a photo interesting. If you just have even light with no shadows, it's kind of boring. It looks like an e-commerce photo. Nothing wrong with that. I'm shooting e-commerce, but in this case, I'm going for dramatic, interesting setups. So here, what's interesting is I feel like my digital camera and the film I'm using are kind of opposites, where the Ricoh GR Digital is not really built for color photography. It's really more of a black and white photography camera. So there's not a lot of thought put into the color processing on it. So cooler tones tend to look a little better and warmer tones don't look great. So here, these aren't looking great on the digital, but with the Ultramax 400, I think I got some of my favorite shots from this entire shoot with this lighting setup that we're going to end up with.
Yeah. Have you never met him?
And I'm still going for the same technique, just a different setup here. So overexposed on the face, the quick jitter, long exposure, and with this light setup, I'm going for less of a ghost vibe and more of a painterly vibe.
I like to overthink stuff like that. Because you definitely can overthink it. I feel like you make a worse decision. Just gotta go with your gut.
with these warmer tones, it really, to me, it kind of gives that painterly Rembrandt style lighting feeling. And in my head, I'm thinking, all right, this is pretty good. Let's get it on film. And there we go. I was very happy with how these came out. You see, if you watch my hand, I'm doing a very quick jitter, more so than a pull away with the camera. What that does is it just gives you a really short pathway of light that you create. So it kind of keeps everything contained within the frame and creates some interesting shapes, like you can see here. It's almost like you're just flinching with the camera if you watch my hand. So here I'm just rotating my body with the camera. And that was a quick flick away. Okay, I tried a little bit of everything there. But that's a good example of, if you really study the way I'm moving my hand in these.
Those were all long
And sometimes I'll move body, like with that one you saw, I moved my body. I kind of rotated my whole upper body to the right. And it was a more organic feeling drag.
Move the stool a little bit towards me. Too much. Yeah.
Because the camera's staying attached and the fulcrum is my hips, I guess. I don't know. It gives it more of like a wider, I don't know. I wish I was a physicist and I could tell you exactly what's happening there, but I'm not. I just know it looks cool.
We're shooting for the Sabina brand.
So now, because I'm happy with the lighting, I'm just doing a few non-drag photos.
Still long exposure.
And I think right there I realized I didn't update my settings, so I'm doing that now.
Do you think people will be surprised by our accents?
Accents?
We both have southern accents.
Yeah, I sometimes get that from people.
You don't think you do?
No, I know I do.
Or you're saying people surprised?
Yeah, sometimes. It's funny. When I was in Europe, I don't know if it's I was talking to someone, and he straight up was like, "You remind me of Hannah Montana." Because my accent. That was the funniest thing I've ever heard someone say.
Was that the blonde hair too?
Nope, that was when I was before. I came back from Europe and dyed it blonde, but he was mainly talking about my accent.
Yeah. What we got?
There's that. Again, very happy with the way this light and the Ultramax 400 played together. It captured it really well. I think with both the cheap Kodak films, with the gold and the Ultramax, this kind of essentially creating a golden light kind of tone is what I would say it felt like in real life, which you see reflected here with that golden hour vibe. These films work really well with that. If you go deeper into the red spectrum, Cinestill is great for that. 800T because of the tungsten balance on the film, which I'm actually going to use in the next video.
Now that my computer's in here,
So stay tuned for that.
make selections.
But with that said, that's the end of this
I hate that.
roll at the end of this shadow session.
Perfect person to do
Thanks
it.
for joining.